you hear me? Test, test, one, two. Test, test, one, two.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our April 2024 Board of Education meeting. Can everyone please stand for the pledge, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please take a seat. Can I have approval of minutes for March 11, 2024 Board of Education meeting? Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Greco, second by Ms. Falco. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. And next, we will have Dr. Christopher Hale, Director of Fine and Performing Arts, who will introduce a student, Aaron Liu, who's going to perform a piece for us tonight.
Good evening. Thank you, Dr. Rogers, Ms. Cheng, and the Board of Education. It's a pleasure to feature some of our student performers at these board meetings. And this evening, we're celebrating the performance of Mr. Aaron Liu, an 11th grader at Syosset High School. Some of his recent accomplishments, he was featured up in Rochester at the NYSSMA Piano Showcase. It's very selective. Only 10 students from around the state are selected to perform up there. Last year, he performed with the Westchester Philharmonic. He performed a concerto with them in concert. He also performed at some international competitions, including one most recently in Nashville. And very recently, just last month, Aaron was featured. He was selected to give an honors recital at the Manhattan School of Music pre-college program. And in addition to all of this, he is also an outstanding clarinetist. He was an all-state alternate on clarinet, so he practices quite a bit. And I think you're going to see the fruits of that this evening. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Aaron Liu, who will be performing Hungarian Rhapsody No. 6 by Franz Liszt.
Wow, that's just amazing talent. Absolutely amazing. It's no wonder that Syosset has been named the best community for music education over and over again. So thank you so much, Aaron, and best of luck in your musical path in the future. Thank you. And we are going to continue our Board of Education meeting, and I do understand that there will be school tomorrow. So Aaron, if you want to make a graceful exit, this is the time for you to do so. Thank you. Thank you again. Okay. Okay, up next will be Dr. Rufo's budget information meeting. So, Dr. Rufo?
Good evening. This is our third presentation for the 24-25 budget. In February and in March, we went through all of the detail of the expenditure codes. We also looked at the tax cap calculation. So tonight, we're going to spend more time on the revenue side of the budget. So we'll start again with our budget goals that we've been going through for several months, and we're pleased to be able to present a budget that we think meets our goals. We are presenting a budget that preserves all of our existing programs and services. We're continuing to support the emotional, social, and emotional needs of our students through continuing our support for new social workers in every school that we implemented last year, our partnership with Northwell. We're also able to make improvements, continued improvements to our facilities. Our budget contains allocations for that we've discussed several months ago. And we're going to talk tonight about how it provides fiscal stability and through the continued use of our reserves and our applied fund balance to help support the tax levy. So at this point in time, we have a tax levy increase of 3.21, and that is below our calculated tax cap of 3.23%. So at this point, we're approximately $40,000 under the tax cap, and our budget-to-budget increase is 4.07. Since the inception of the tax cap in 2012 and 13, we've always remained under the tax cap, and we continue that this year, although there were certainly pressures on us and on all districts to be able to get under the cap, and we've talked about those extensively: health insurance, pension costs, inflationary pressures, and you can see even on the controller's website where they provide the levy cap for the school districts, or the allowable levy growth factor of 2% over the last 3 years, and you can see how that compares to inflation and CPI over those years, over about 17%. Which explains why, partially, it's been such a challenge for districts and for us to remain under the cap. So that is the tax cap calculation. And it's, again, it's 3.23. I went through the detail of it, but I wanted to present it again because we will be submitting this finally tomorrow. And just to go through, to get us started on the revenue side, I want to just take a moment to explain the difference between the budget and the tax levy. So up at the top, you have the budget, which is the first line, which is the spending plan. So those are the expenditures that support the budget and the programs and the services that the school district offers. And from that, we subtract all available revenue to arrive at the tax levy, and that's the amount of funds that's raised through taxation. So we have state aid is the second line item that we reduce by, local revenue, then the appropriation of fund balance, and the use of our restricted reserves, which we'll talk about. So we'll start with state aid, and the figures up there are the same figures that we presented in January with the executive budget. And at that time, we told you that, or you can see that there's about a $220,000 reduction in foundation aid, and that's a result of two changes that were made to the formula at the time. One is the removal of the hold harmless provision, which is stops a district from receiving a lower amount of foundation aid than the prior year, and then a change in the way that CPI was calculated and applied in the formula that would reduce, given the recent CPI, if that were used, it would be a higher percent than what the state did, which was do a rolling average. So the governor, the executive, there was this release yesterday that indicated that a temporary or budget or preliminary budget was closer, and that eliminated the provision for the hold harmless, but still kept in the CPI adjustment. So it won't go back to the, I think it was 4 and change. It'll be some sort of rolling average or less than that. But the hold harmless will not be in effect. Or the removal of that provision, I'm sorry, is being suspended. There's also discussion about changing the foundation aid. So we're going to be watching this over the next year for the following school year. And then aside from foundation aid, all of the other aids are essentially expense-based aids. And you can see that our BOCES aid is up due to additional projects we did. Our building aid is down slightly. That's because last year we received funds which were 50% of the cost of an emergency project. And so that's sort of where our state aid is at the moment. And there's possibilities that if we have additional state aid and if it's sufficient, we could use some of that to reduce the levy further and or reduce some of our appropriation of fund balance. A positive part of our state aid is we received our allocation for UPK, and we had the lottery about a week and a half ago, and we were able to provide spots for all of the students that were interested in that program. So that next year will be the 4th year of that program for us. Local revenue is another one of our line items. 14 million for next year is what we're projecting. And a noteworthy change in that is about in the middle of the page under uses of money and property. You can see the interest on investments went up significantly, and that is due to increased interest rates. Also helpful that the board approved the use of NICLAS, so we were able to have additional revenue because of the higher rates associated with that program. So that was good news. Our rental of buildings is up a bit, as is our tuition. We're proposing for next year to appropriate about $3 million in fund balance. And so over the course of the years that are up there, the average has been about $3.5 million that we've appropriated. So we were able to take interest income, some of that additional interest income, and apply it and increase our fund balance contribution. And in a difficult year like this, that was very helpful in order for us to get under the cap. We're going to continue to use our restricted reserves, or we're proposing to use our restricted reserves to help support the budget, as we have done in the past. You can see that we're proposing an amount of about $7.2 million, and along those, I guess, 5 different reserves. And the reason for the increase is directly tied to the increased costs that we're realizing in those areas: ERS, TRS, workers' comp, and then the other 2 are less significant. And our ERS funds the entire line item, and the difference in TRS between last year and this year is just the incremental difference due to the increase. So our next steps are the board has the property tax report card on the agenda tonight that contains all of this information. And once approved, and in addition to the overall numbers of the budget and the tax levy, we also have to represent all of the reserves that we're using and the projected balances. And once approved, this will be submitted to the state, and then we'll work on compiling all of the documents for the budget for posting. So that is the revenue side. At our next meeting, at the hearing, we'll go through the budget highlights that we've been talking about in all 3 meetings, and just briefly go over the revenue and reserves.
Thank you, Dr. Ruffo, for the presentation. Are there any questions from the board for Dr. Ruffo? Mr. Greco, please.
Thank you, Dr. Ruffo. Always very informative. The tax cap calculation, you're submitting that tomorrow, right? So this is now a fixed number, or is there still a chance that the 323 will change?
The 323 is the estimate that we're submitting, so that is not going to change, that estimate.
You also, you showed on one of the revenue slides, rental of buildings. It was about a $50,000 number, obviously nothing
Yes.
wonderful, but is that tied to some of our summer rental agreements that we've been entering into?
Yes, precisely. Yep.
Okay, I guess the other thing I'll mention, not really a question, but sometimes you got to call out good people, and the night class, the use of night class, and the additional interest income here. Obviously, interest rates are up, so it would be up no matter what. But to go into that program, I just wanted to shout out to the Citizens Advisory Committee because they were a part of that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Ostrich.
So I've been following the headlines out of Albany, the aid that's coming down from the state. How much variability are we likely to potentially see, and what parts of the revenue line would we most likely see that variability in the next week, et cetera, next few weeks?
We would see it in the foundation aid, which is the largest aid category. And we had a reduction, I want to say, of about 220,000. I can go back to that. It's that first line on the state aid slide. So we went from 23,051 to 22,800. So it's about 220. So we're hopeful that that will be restored. But there's a lot that goes into the formula, but that's my hope. It's difficult to predict. There's different models, but looks like that's the upside.
Dr. Park? Is there more space available for UPK? We have 309 students. Is there more room? Is there more money if more students register?
And if we don't have more students and we have to give back, is there any money that's left over that we have to give back?
It is a per pupil allocation, so you're only, at this point in time, you cannot take the extra that you might save from having fewer students and use it for the students that you have. So it's a certain dollar amount, 5,400 allocation per student.
Right, so do we have more money for UPK if more students if there are more students coming in?
Yes,
Okay, and if we don't have more than 309 students, then that amount is going to be deducted from our total amount of state fund. So actually total number is going to decrease.
yes, the allocation, you get a certain allocation, but it is based on a per pupil amount. So if you can't enroll 309 students, then you don't receive that money.
So we have for 309 now, but have we filled it? Is there more, less than that number?
I believe the number was 250 something.
So Dr. Park, I would just add to Dr. Rufo's explanation. This program exists outside of the district's general fund budget, and it is self-sustaining, so it's not supported with any district revenues. So we operate this program in partnership with several different entities, and they get the $5,400 per pupil grant directly from us. So even though our overall state aid amount would go down if we didn't fully exploit the 309 slots that we were allocated, from a impact on district operations perspective, there would be no impact, because whatever amount we got from the state would be exactly equal to what we were obligated to give to the preschool providers.
Ms. Abramson?
Sorry, not really a question. I just want to clarify, because you did mention facilities in here, and the facilities that you're speaking of is not the big facilities project. That is a separate vote. This is facilities, upkeep, and things that are very, very necessary that we have to do, correct?
That's correct. These are small-scale projects, not the bond large-scale projects we've been talking about. Thank you.
Mr. Ostrick?
Just one question for you, Dr. Rogers, just for some context. Our restricted reserve balances, can you talk about, given the level of inflation we've seen the last few years across Long Island and other districts, what kind of havoc is being wrought to those districts that don't have significant restricted reserves that they can draw on during these periods, and how many districts are starting to blow through caps, and the kind of chatter that you're getting about other districts who may need to?
Sure, this has been a difficult budget year for all school districts, regardless of what fiscal circumstances they entered the year. Like us, they're dealing with inflation in costs, inflation in pension costs, inflation in health insurance costs, contractual increases that we all share. And then we're all dealing with the uncertainty of state aid. In some ways, because the state has not been generous with us, the fluctuation in state aid is less impactful in the budget in Syosset than it might be in a place that is highly dependent on state aid, for example. That said, there have only been a handful of school districts that have attempted to propose tax levy increases that exceed the cap. That requires a 60% majority rather than a 50% majority. But I'm hearing now of more school districts that are going to be proposing to their publics tax levy increases that exceed the cap. So I think that is a new feature of this year. The state's increase clearly will not keep up with inflation. In fact, it is an explicit design of their formula to blend the high levels of inflation from this year with low levels of inflation from prior years in order to get a smaller average number. But we're not buying things from 2019, we're buying things from 2024. So, and again, that's a challenge that we all share. So to your point, we have been able to manage some of these fluctuations by using our reserves to smooth out the high points. And what we've also been fortunate to be able to do at the end of every year, we work hard to manage the budget, and the funds that are remaining at the end of the year, the unspent funds, replenish the funds that we use at the beginning of the year to smooth out some of these bumps. So we've been fortunate to be able to replenish our reserves, and they have allowed us to navigate through these last two very difficult years without having to propose a break in the cap.
Are there any more questions? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Rufo. Okay. Next item on the agenda will be Dr. Rufo's, who will present the going to give us the treasurer's report and appropriations adjustments. Dr. Rufo, all yours again.
Okay, as shown in the treasurer's report, the cash on hand for the month end February 2024 was $88,299,148.74. It shows that bank balances for all cash accounts were reconciled to the book balances and were collateralized in accordance with the district's banking agreements and investment policy.
Okay, it works now, okay. Up next, we'll have Dr. David Balsamo, Coordinator of World Languages, to give us a presentation.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to speak about our World Language Program. Our school district has a long legacy of quality language instruction and broad language offerings. Tonight, we'll talk about key updates to the program and highlight recent successes. Our K-12 World Language Program is built toward 3 goals. First, we aim to build students' proficiency in the languages they study, so they learn to communicate using words and phrases at the novice level. As they gain more vocabulary, learners become more proficient. Their interpersonal speaking skills build, as do their skills in interpreting authentic texts from the target cultures, like songs, articles, and videos. Authentic materials help illustrate and bring to life the cultures where the target language is spoken. Learners explore the products and practices of the cultures and better understand their perspectives. Studying cultures from around the globe makes for a natural connection to our district's social studies curriculum. Syosset is one of the few districts in our region to offer a world language program that begins in kindergarten and extends through 12th grade. Elementary students begin in our FLEX, or Foreign Language Experience program, which introduces students to learning languages, fosters intercultural understanding, and builds communication skills. Since the program does not focus on only one language, learners become acquainted with a range of cultures and languages as they move through the elementary grades. Students develop novice-level communication skills in the language, which helps them decide which language they want to pursue when they reach middle school. Our FLEX teachers collaborate with classroom teachers to take advantage of opportunities to coordinate lessons. For example, in first grade science, students learn about the water cycle, which connected well with a FLEX lesson about precipitation and weather in Spanish. In order to be sure our curriculum is current and meets the needs of students, we periodically review programs to find opportunities for enhancement and adjustments. Our FLEX program began revision last summer with an updated program coming this September. Several years ago, we began American Sign Language instruction in kindergarten and first grade, which matches well with early literacy skills taught at that level, such as learning the alphabet and the sounds letters make. Fingerspelling, which is the ASL representation of the alphabet, reinforces understanding of the building blocks of language. In grades 2 and 3, we plan to implement a curriculum that will teach Asian languages and cultures, while in grades 4 and 5, the focus will be Romance languages and cultures. The goal of this change is for learners to explore the target cultures through the topics and themes listed here. The revision also allows for more connections with the elementary social studies curriculum. Students make a language choice in 5th grade among Chinese, French, Italian, Korean, or Spanish. Giving middle schoolers 5 language choices is unique in our region, with most schools offering 2 and sometimes 3 languages. Offering diverse languages is a feature that distinguishes our program. Learners develop communication skills at the novice level throughout grades 6, 7, and 8. By the end of 8th grade, learners easily communicate using sentences and strings of sentences, bringing them to the intermediate level. They earn 1 high school credit by passing the Checkpoint A exam in June of 8th grade. We know that proficiency in a language builds with continued study over many years. So when students transition from middle to high school, the vast majority continue in their language, working through the intermediate range of proficiency. Intermediate level language learners can handle most everyday situations they would encounter in the target language, from making plans with friends, to arranging travel accommodations and transportation, to shopping in markets and shops. Our large range of language offerings affords students the opportunity to study multiple languages. This year, 31 students take advantage of this and are enrolled in 2 world languages at the high school. At the end of level 3, which typically is June 10th grade, students take the Checkpoint B exam, which qualifies them for the Advanced Regents Diploma. As the enrollment chart indicates, a high percentage of juniors and seniors go on to Checkpoint C, with many taking college-level courses or the AP language course in Chinese, French, Italian, or Spanish. We view our students' continuation in world language courses through senior year as a strong indicator of the program's overall appeal. The culmination of our program is for seniors to earn the New York State Seal of Biliteracy, a graduation credential that indicates intermediate high proficiency in English and another language to employers and colleges. Most of our SEAL earners come through the World Language Program, but English language learners can also earn the designation, as well as students who can speak and read and write a heritage language. The process for earning the seal is rigorous. Candidates must demonstrate their proficiency through standardized tests, panel interviews, and coursework. Last year, 92 seniors graduated with the seal, which is among the highest number of recipients in our region. As we look forward, implementing a revised FLEX program at the elementary level presents a promising opportunity for world languages in Syosset. The new curriculum will engage students in learning about the world in multicultural perspective, providing opportunities to reinforce the goals of our social studies program. The revision will also introduce students to other languages, foreshadowing the options they will have when they enter the secondary program. Several years ago, with the board's support, we began an articulated program in Chinese, starting in grade 6. Our first cohort will be seniors next year, bringing full implementation to fruition. A similar process is underway in Korean, with our first cohort entering grade 8 next year. Enrollment in languages is fluid and shifts from year to year. As enrollment in some languages increases, enrollment in other languages decreases. Each year, we monitor the impact these shifts have on our language offerings. Another area for growth we see is for more students to earn the New York State Seal of Biliteracy, especially for ENL students or those who communicate in a heritage or home language. Granting the Seal of Biliteracy has become a way to acknowledge and recognize students' expertise in a language we do not offer in our program, expanding our reach even further. Thank you for this opportunity to present our program and for your ongoing support for our work.
Thank you, Dr. Balsamo, for the informative presentation. I do have a question regarding the flex curriculum revisions for September 2024. How is this program different from the existing one and also from what we had years ago?
Right, so the current program does not include any of the Asian languages. The new program will. And that's one big shift. The other big shift is that teachers will be housed in one elementary school rather than moving to different elementary schools each year, so that's a little bit of a staffing shift that will happen. The kindergarten and first grade stays the same with sign language, but it will shift in that way.
Okay, additional question. So you're saying that the teachers that we have for these, K to 5, they'll be housed in just one school instead of going to be shared with 2 or 3 other elementary schools?
No, so each elementary flex teacher will be assigned to one elementary school, and that's kind of going to be their home in an ongoing way. In the current system, the teachers shift each year. So each year, the elementary teachers move from one school to the next. So this is going to give a little more continuity in the buildings, to have one staff member that will be there for the long haul.
Mr. Greco?
Thank you, Dr. Balsamo. This sort of carries on to Ms. Chang's question. So in the past, if I remember correctly, and I should because I have a third grader, you split up Italian, French, and Spanish into 1 year each. So now you're going to teach those 3 languages over the course of 2 years?
Yeah, I wonder if I can go back in the slides. If I can, I'll show you. We're going to focus more on themes through, let's see, here, these themes. So when we get to these themes, we'll focus we'll learn about each language, really the cultural kind of implication, not necessarily one language. It's going to be a little bit more focused on the themes with the language and the culture rather than one specific language at a time. So for example, when we do holidays, we might talk in the European set, we might talk about holidays in Spain and in France and in Italy, for example. Not necessarily just only French like we do now when it's the year for French, for example, or the year for Spanish. It's going to be a little bit more focused through the events and the culture rather than the language itself.
One other thing I note, you mentioned Checkpoint A taking place at the end of 8th grade, and something that is, I'm not going to say it bothers me because I didn't know about it when my oldest was in 8th grade, but it's funny how so many kids in 8th grade take algebra and earth science, and I feel like they know what they're getting into, but the Checkpoint A for the 8th grade language, that grade appears on the high school transcript, correct? And is that the case for all kids that take Checkpoint A? And if it is, and Dr. Rogers, there's a comment for you, that's something that definitely should be out there. I think a lot of 8th grade parents assume algebra or science are going to be high school transcript classes, but maybe not the foreign language. Again, just a comment.
No, it's funny because ours was the first one years and years ago to have a middle school course that would get high school credit. Language was the first one. So it's funny that shifted now and that's kind of out of people's memory. But yeah, that's always been the case. And our students, by and large, perform very well on those assessments and get the credit coming into high school.
Dr. Park?
Thank you for the presentation. And I'm a strong believer in training our students to be global citizens. And I have to give credit to Hina for teaching me that word, global citizen. I love that. And it's not just in language, but in terms of embracing differences, different cultures, appreciating and understanding the differences, ability to discuss different viewpoints. Yeah, we are training our students to be global citizens, and language plays a very big part in developing that kind of skill set. And our students, when they graduate from here, their colleagues are not going to be just from US, they're going to be from all over the world. And we know by just visiting cities in Europe or in Asia, they're speaking English so well. There are multiple language speakers fluent And in order to be competitive, I think we need to train our students to do the same. I mean, we do have a little bit of advantage because they are speaking English to us. However, if our students don't speak the other languages, then they have to rely on other people's ability to speak English. So we don't want to fall behind on that. And Syosset being a large school, we can afford more languages. We can offer more languages compared to other districts that have just half or third of our student body. And if we decide to offer choices, I would love to have these languages structured, supported, so that they will thrive, and our students are excited to take these languages, especially because they have the ability to choose. It's not just given to them or they were locked into it because they didn't have choice. So I hope that we can have a stable setup for each level of language with low turnover of teachers and consistent curriculum and consistent and strong growth, so that our students are benefiting from this robust language programs, even if they choose languages other than Spanish and Chinese. That's my hope. Thank you.
Ms. Levitin?
Thank you. I guess I have a few questions, but I'll try to be concise. So to echo Shawnee, what are the criteria and the process we have in place to add or drop a language? What percentage, unless it's drastically different per language, do we have of heritage speakers in class versus non-speakers? Do we have, I guess, third question, do we do anything proactively to promote learning, taking a language among the non-speakers, non-heritage speakers? And I guess fourth question, which is the big picture, are we merely following the enrollment here in Syosset, you know, when determining what class to add or to drop or to cut or downsize? Or are we looking at, you know, the 5-year horizon, 10-year horizon, future horizon in the job market, which languages will dominate the economy? Which languages are circulating mostly in this industry, that industry, and another industry? Or is it merely, you know, following the enrollment and interest, local interests in the language? I'm sorry, too many questions. But.
Sure, I'll try to answer. So as far as a process for adding languages, we went through that twice in my recent experience. First with Chinese about 6 years ago, and then with Korean about 3 years ago. And the process was canvassing students, having forums with parents, getting feedback about what languages people were interested in having us offer. And at the end of that process, we resulted first, again, about 6 years ago with Chinese and about 3 years ago with Korean being added. So that's the process basically that we have in place for adding languages. As far as heritage language, you asked about heritage heritage speakers, right? So taking the languages, right. So I don't have statistics on that necessarily, on what percentage of, let's say, the Italian classes are Italian heritage students or Spanish, or I don't have specifics on that. It would be interesting to look at it. As far as promoting, your third question was about promoting languages? So,
yes,
yeah.
Promoting
So,
among the non-speakers.
Right. So what we try to do is give kids lots of choices, and we give kids more choices than anybody. You know, the number of languages that we offer in middle school is just, no one has 5 languages like we do. We always encourage kids, my mantra is follow your heart. Study the language you're interested in. Because when you learn a language that you're interested in, that's when you're going to pursue it. That's when you're going to really learn it, when you want to learn it, when you're interested in it. So I always tell kids, follow your heart. Take the language you're interested in. Whatever it is that turns you on, that's what you should take. We're very careful not to promote one language over another, because it would go against that idea, right, of kids kind of fulfilling their own destiny in terms of their language journey. Your other question was about?
how much does enrollment drive your staffing decisions?
Completely. Well, the process is that students sign up for classes in about January. They sign up for whatever they're going to take for the following year. We sit down, we get a printout basically of how many students have signed up for each language. I sit down as the coordinator of the department with the high school administration, with the central administration, and we look at those numbers and we review those numbers, and that's when we figure out how many sections of this we need, how many sections of that we need, and that's when we would make any decisions about what makes sense to continue and what really doesn't make any sense anymore. And again, it's all based on student interest and what students have decided to sign up for.
Sorry, just to follow up, you mentioned canvassing the parents. Are we talking 8th grade, 5th grade, elementary school?
Yeah, when we went through the process, it was with elementary parents, if I recall correctly, because the program was essentially going to begin for 6th graders. So I believe we actually focused on the 5th grade parents specifically because we knew those would be the kids who would be coming into the next, group, the next cohort.
Are there any more questions for Dr. Balsamo? Okay, Ms. Falco, and then Ms. Dostrick.
So I'm going to be easy. I actually just wanted to pay you guys a compliment. The program, having had the opportunity to have some of my kids go through it, and having had the opportunity to see their level of proficiency in action during a emergency situation in a foreign country where English was not the language spoken, the level of proficiency that the kids attains in Syosset was really mind-blowing, and their ability to translate and to converse was really so important, and I think setting them up for such future success in college and for those kids who choose to study abroad or in future job markets where being bilingual will really serve them well, and they're really getting such a strong basis, and it starts in the schools, and the fact that they come out so proficient, if they choose to continue all the way through, the level of proficiency was really mind-blowing. They were incredible. So I just wanted to compliment you guys and tell you that the children the level of their proficiency is fantastic. So well done, thank you.
I'll pass that along, thanks.
Hi, thank you. I have a couple questions. They'll be sprayed around the room a little bit. So first, I think I heard you mention that the number of middle school languages that we offer is unusual when compared to peers. Is there some kind of significant difficulty in offering so many languages as middle schools that we're overcoming? How would you describe those difficulties? How would you describe how we've been able to overcome them if we have?
Sure. So one of the factors that impacts that is teaming, right? Because that can have a big impact on how the day is scheduled. It's also smaller. Remember, we have 2 middle schools. We have 1 high school. So when you split the whole group in half, now you have half the kids. So in our district in particular, in other schools, I'm not sure how they go through their decision-making process, but I know that typically it's Spanish and something else. It could be Spanish and Italian, it could be Spanish and French, but it's hard. It's a challenge to schedule, the building around. For example, some of the classes that have fewer students in them, you wind up with only 1 class. So that means you really have to schedule around that 1 class of kids who wants to take whatever the language is that only has 1 class that year, for example.
And the decision to offer the large number of languages was based on parent canvassing or polling, or some other strategic priority that was sort of discussed, understood?
So this was about, like I said, about 6 years ago when we added Chinese for the first time. And it was based on reviewing the program, which we do periodically. We take a look at what we're doing. One of the things that we noticed at that time was that we only had European languages, right, for grades 6 through 12. We had some Asian languages at the high school, but we didn't have any that started in 6th grade. And we looked around and said, well, why should there only be Asian languages starting in middle school? And we said, well, if we want, at the time, we were picking one Asian language, right? We were looking to see what could we add to our program that would make it fuller and a little bit more representational, right? Rather than just having the 3 European languages at the time, it was Spanish, French, and Italian. And so that was the innovation that we made at that time, to say, let's add something. And the process that we went through was to decide which language it should be, right? There were a few kind of on the table, and we went through that process to say, well, at the end of the day, this is the one that seems to have the most support in the community.
So I'm sorry, I'm kind of just getting started. So the flex curriculum revision ties very nicely to the presentations we've been seeing about the skills that are across disciplines, and I can see there's intentionality in bringing that to the elementary schools, which I think is fantastic. In fact, I think to get a firm understanding of language without culture, context, geography, history, probably puts us back in the past, whereas I think in order for us to be moving into flexible thinking and training our children to do that, we really need to continue to think strategically about how to allocate lessons and pedagogy in that direction. I guess my question to you, Dr. Rogers, is it sounds like the strategic level thinking went into the elementary curriculum flex program, but I'm not sure that I understand the strategic level thinking about what we're trying to accomplish at the middle school and the high school in terms of language enrollment and language offerings. It sounds like we're following a bit of a random walk by surveying parents. If we have huge intentionality in what we're trying to do in the elementary school curriculum, I'm not sure I understand what the decision-making process is at a strategic level for what we're trying to accomplish with languages at the middle school and the high school. We don't offer German. A lot of people might say that German language is the most important for business in Europe as opposed to Italian or French or Russian or Japanese. In other words, there's a high level of discussion that I feel like might be warranted, and I don't think I understand how that strategic level decision is being made, or if that's the level it rises to. And then I have one or two other things.
Yeah, so I think I can put a little more context around the decision making and maybe clarify it a little bit. So when I arrived here 10 years ago, the board was engaged in a discussion of how much proficiency students would be able to acquire in the flex program at the elementary level, and whether the board should or should not put all of its eggs in one basket. So at the end of that study, the conclusion that we arrived at, and we went to neighboring school districts that had dual language programs and other kinds of structures, was at best, we thought students might be able to get themselves between a half a year and a year head start on where they would be in 6th grade otherwise. And that did not seem worth the challenges of staffing a program like that, which I won't go into too deeply, but they are daunting. And the loss of the ability for students to have a broader intercultural experience in elementary school. And so the board at that time, I agreed with their decision, decided to leave the program as it was. And as you've observed, we've been evolving that program and moving it to align with the kinds of cross-cutting work that we're doing elsewhere in the curriculum. Also at that time, as we were studying this, I was startled to see that we had something like 80% of our seniors still enrolled in a world language. That's also an unheard of statistic. And that meant that we had lots of students who were at high levels of proficiency in whatever language they were choosing to study. When the state offered the seal of biliteracy, which I think is a valuable credential for students for lots of reasons, college and the world of work, it occurred to me that we had several advantages. One, we had so many kids that were still enrolled in world language as seniors, so they were likely to be proficient enough to earn this seal. Two, we have lots of heritage speakers in our school district, and they will have a natural advantage in earning the seal. And so some of our decision-making was around how do we maximize students' potential to maximize their proficiency in at least one more language. So part of the conversation around adding Chinese and then Korean at the middle school level was this would allow them to have a longer ramp. So if prior to adding Chinese, Chinese 1 would be offered in 9th grade. The furthest you could get would be Chinese 4. But by starting in 6th grade, students would be able to move on to AP Chinese and have more proficiency, more likely to earn the seal of biliteracy. So as Dr. Balsamo points out, there are some staffing challenges to having so many languages at the middle school, but what it affords us is the opportunity for students to earn the longest possible sequence in 5 languages. So we had with the board 7 years ago when we started the process of adding Chinese, long conversation about how all of our long sequences were in Romance languages, and there was an interest in exploring adding at least one sequence in a non-Romance language. After our conversations with the parents, we settled on Chinese as being the most likely to succeed because of the larger number of heritage speakers in Syosset. So the overall strategic goal is to continue to do what Dr. Balsamo suggested, which is follow kids' passions, but also allow them to pursue those passions in a way that would build the maximum amount of proficiency so that they could earn these kinds of credentials. So that's the strategy behind where the language programs have been at the secondary level.
Okay, I think I understand that. So then the follow-on question is, the languages that we chose are a mix of those that have the longest potential runway through the most advanced degrees and those that don't. And some of the ones we chose are based on local desire to have it, as opposed to sort of maximizing that long runway for credential. Is that what I'm trying to understand?
I'm not sure I quite followed the question. Are you asking?
In other words, at the end of the long chain, have we chosen a mix of languages that have the longest chain and those that don't for a specific reason because of local interest, as opposed to just maximizing the curriculum where we can have the longest chain just generally, or for some other strategic reason?
Yeah. With Chinese, we saw that there was the possibility of having very long sequence there. When we went back and talked to parents, and for both of these additions of languages, we took a lot of feedback from parents. We held a lot of meetings. We were in the village elementary school library talking with parents about this. And some of this is providing long ramps and runways, and some of this is listening to our parents in our community. So I'd say it's a blend of both of those things. We want to be attentive to what the parents have shared with us, and we also want to be strategic about giving kids deep levels of proficiency.
And I just had one other quick thing that I wanted to ask about, which is, Dr. Balsamo, what are some of the biggest challenges and that you see in terms of the language programs that we should be aware of, at least at a strategic level? And then Dr. Rogers, I don't see a lot of data in how we're doing, so maybe if we could get some update on how we're doing, that would be helpful for me.
So in addition to my real job as the World Language Coordinator here, I'm also the president of the New York State Association of World Language Administrators. And I can tell you that the biggest challenge we face in my role across the state is staffing, is getting people to become language teachers, getting great, talented language teachers into the classroom. New York City has a shortage. We have challenges finding teachers. Everybody in my role wishes that they could just find great teachers. That's probably our biggest challenge.
Okay. Are there any more questions? Ms. Koshia?
Thank you, Dr. Balsamo. I just have a quick question for you. At the elementary level on K to 5, actually no, I'm sorry, 2 to 5, are the children actually learning like basic language along with the cultural topics and themes, which I think is wonderful to introduce them to? It also may give them a sense of which path they want to take once they leave elementary school, moving to middle school language. So do they actually learn different languages within the grade levels?
Yeah, so the idea is that they are learning language as they're learning some of the culture. So it might be, for example, words in a song. When we're doing the unit on holidays, maybe kids would learn the lyrics to a song in French about X holiday, right? So there is some language involved in it. It's going to be a little bit of, everything, obviously, because it's going to be through the focus of these themes and topics. But yes, there will be a language component as well.
Okay, thank you again, Dr.
My
Balsamo,
pleasure, thank
for
you.
the presentation. All right, moving on next, we'll have Dr. Rogers give us his monthly superintendent's report. Okay.
I'll be brief. I know we've done a lot of work already tonight. I just want to circle back to the earlier conversation that we had around the budget. That's where most of my attention has been focused. As Ms. Abramson pointed out earlier, and thank you for saying that, I wanted to make sure that folks understood that the board is still in the process of taking feedback on the larger facilities proposal around the major projects that we need to do to accommodate our enrollment growth. And that is not part of the budget proposal that's going to be in front of the public in May, but that is something that we're very much still working on and appreciative of the feedback that we've been getting. Secondly, I neglected to talk about the one challenge that we are facing in our budget that not many districts are facing, and that is our enrollment increase. So Newsday did a series within the last 2 weeks about enrollment declines across Long Island, and some 2/3 of the districts on Long Island are seeing fewer students. We're in the opposite posture. We've grown about 500 students over the course of the 10 years that I've been here. And what that has done is exhausted most of the available space in many of our buildings. So assuming that enrollment trend will increase, and the students are already in the elementary schools that will eventually be in our middle and high schools, we're going to need to be able to accommodate that enrollment growth as those students age and transition into the secondary program. So in addition to inflation that we've been dealing with, we've had inflation of our student body that we've been dealing with. So that has made our challenge all the more interesting, all the more challenging, and therefore our use of our interest income and our reserves all the more important. With that said, I also just want to comment a little bit on state aid, trying to read between the lines of the governor's announcement earlier this week of the framework for budget deal and Dr. Rufo's prognostications about what it may mean for us. There's a provision that has been in the budget since I worked on it 30 years ago that said no district will get less money next year than it got last year. The governor's rhetoric has been, I don't want to pay for empty seats, meaning since there are so many school districts that are in enrollment decline, they no longer want to support the same levels of aid. We're not in that category. So what is challenging for us and why our state aid was reduced was because the governor recalculated inflation to be something less than what it actually is, a number that is smaller. So to the extent that the legislature has an inflation number that is more consistent with our lived reality, that will improve our outcomes. What we won't know is the interaction between not getting less money than we got last year, which would restore the $200,000 cut, and how they calculate inflation, which might reduce something more globally overall. So we won't know for, it sounds like another week, what that will work out to exactly. But for the board's benefit, I want to just share what our plans are. I don't anticipate a windfall in state aid, but if we are restored to the level of last year, our proposal would be to reduce our use of fund balance, because I think the less we support the budget using fund balance, the better off we are, and then we would use the remainder to reduce the tax levy further. We're about $40,000 under the cap now. I'd like to see us get a little bit further under the cap if we could. So our plan is to take whatever restorations the legislature adds to the governor's budget and spread them between those two priorities. So we wouldn't use those restorations to increase spending any further. We would use it to improve the revenue side of the budget further. So that would be my recommendation, and I just wanted to let folks know that that's how our approach will be. This is an unusual year in that the budget is so late. Albany is certainly aware of school districts' budget deadlines. They are, not just cutting it to the wire, they're beyond the wire at this point. This was a circumstance that was common 30 years ago, but we haven't really experienced it for the last 10 years. So it has made planning difficult when a big chunk of the revenues are just an unknown. But I think Dr. Rufo has managed this process admirably, and I think we're in a position now where whatever the state does, we know how we're going to handle it.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers. Are there any questions from the board for Dr. Rogers? Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, next we'll have Dr. Rufo give us a report on the Citizen Advisory Committee for Finance.
The committee met on March 12th, and we discussed the budget. We discussed state aid at the time. We also talked about the bond work and the process that we were involved. We also shared with the committee our plans to lease office space as part of our additional classroom space that we're creating in Southwoods. We have to relocate some offices. So we talked with committee members about the leasing process, and they gave us some good suggestions. So that was the meeting in March, and the next meeting is tomorrow evening.
Thank you, Dr. Rufo. Okay, next will be the Anti-Bias Task Force report, and we will have the co-chairs, Rabbi Jamie Shohavit, and also Pastor Rebecca Sheridan, to give us the recommendations from the Anti-Bias Task Force.
Thank you so much for having us for this presentation. We want to thank everyone who was on the Anti-Bias Task Force. We're not going to name everyone by name because it's their choice to lift names out, but we want to thank everyone who worked with us and countless hours. So first, we would like everyone to be aware that there was a Diversity and Inclusivity Task Force in 2021. They created suggestions and recommendations, and we firstly recommended looking back at that document, and second, we want you to know that we're building upon those recommendations that were in that as well. So let's start with the task force, the reasons that it was created, and some other information. The task force was created due to bias incidents happening in our schools, specifically swastikas at first. Anti-Semitism was brought to the community and the board's attention. The public discussed and revealed other claims of hate crimes as well, and therefore a diverse task force was formed in response to community concerns. The board then asked the co-chairs to be co-chairs, and we said yes. The school and the communities within the school voted on their representatives so that these representatives could hopefully represent a large and diverse group amongst our community. The representatives came together to form this group along with some of the administration and board members as well, and we met. We met together, we shared our backgrounds together, we shared our experiences together, we discussed what was happening in the schools, we researched, we met again, and we met again, and we met again, and we came up with ideas, and we then discussed those ideas and tore them apart in an attempt to come up with ways that we could truly make a difference. We held town hall meetings to meet these goals, to hear the community. We held a town hall meeting, to hear the community's concerns. We collected input through emails as well, and input from the general community also. And then as we were creating this idea with these goals, we ended up creating 5 subgroups. I will list the 5 subgroups and then hand over to Pastor Sheridan, who will discuss a few of them. So our first subgroup was best practices and existing initiatives. Our second was specific to our student experience. Third were family partnerships to bring it outside of the school buildings but within our community. The fourth was the code of conduct and the DASA reporting, known as the Dignity for All Students Act. And the fifth was data collection. So with that, pass it to you. Do you want me to click or do you want?
Can you click?
I can click,
Okay.
yes.
I just want to first echo my gratitude for task force members, some of whom are literally standing behind us, and to say this was really a group effort where everyone's input everyone's voice was heard in the diverse representation on this task force. And best practices, which I'll speak about now, was our largest area to look at what are other school districts maybe doing that we could learn from, other resources based on the expertise in the room from the task force, what are they bringing? And everyone, while this was a subgroup of 3 people dedicated on working on this particular area, all of our task force members contributed to some of the resources you see in the document. So the recommendations include really intentionally, again, going back to the former diversity task force's recommendations and continuing to be really intentional about how we foster cultural competency using a culturally responsive teaching framework and mitigating unconscious bias. Curriculum evaluation. I learned, some of our task force already knew, that the school really utilizes a courageous conversations framework and principles that all staff are trained in to help facilitate difficult conversations, especially some of the salient issues that have come up in our community at this time. We cannot emphasize enough how important it is to train our staff and students to have difficult conversations respectfully. We also recommend pursuing external organizations' resources, which may include a consulting firm that would cost money. And there are several that are good that specialize in education spaces. Hiring practices is another piece of this recommendation, which again was recommended and being worked on in the previous task force recommendations. So we encourage commitment to diversity in hiring practices, striving to hire staff who represent all of our students. And that's all I'm going to say about hiring practices, but I want to also then move to social media. We are unsure how much social media, looking at social media use critically and understanding the effects of social media on our society and biologically and emotional, how that is currently being taught in our school district. So we recommend especially focusing on this area, including exploring how artificial intelligence impacts our conversation, our understanding, and our human relationships. And then maybe the most controversial recommendation is to consider prohibiting phone usage during school hours from kindergarten through grade 8 as a means to decrease bias incidents and strengthen relationships. In-person, healthy communication, because we all know the detrimental effects of extreme and overuse, excessive overuse of smartphones. Okay, I'll turn it back over to Rabbi Shalhevet.
So the next few slides are just to prove that we didn't make this stuff up. If you look at the bottom of each slide, you'll see that they're all citations for everything that that Pastor Rebecca spoke about. So we have citations for all, and they're in the packets that you received. I'm just sort of wading through that. Our next section, our next subgroup, was the student experience, and it was going straight to the students. We had representatives from both middle schools and the high school, student representatives, who, might I add, are incredibly impressive young adults and becoming young adults. So we are incredibly grateful for not only their long hours, and we hear they managed to keep their grades up during that time, which is really impressive, but the respect and the knowledge that they brought and the passion to this idea of all speaking together and learning from each other, and peace really was absolutely impressive to all of us. So all the recommendations here rely on effectively communicating with the students so that the students are aware of them. It turns out that there are some wonderful practices happening in the schools, but not every student knows about it, and therefore they can't take advantage of it. And so all of these recommendations rely on good communication. One is to create safe spaces where we know that people can remain anonymous and there's nothing specifically let known of that. Different places students could meet with guidance counselors and adults where they might not be seen walking into an office that they are assumed to be going in for a reason. There might be another space that they can use. Continue supporting things like Syosset Unite, which is student-run and specifically about interrelations. Reinforce a sense of community by doing that. The students had the wonderful idea to expand Junior Day to younger students as well. I don't need to explain Junior Day to you guys, I hope, because I can't, but the students could, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. They also would like to suggest town hall meetings for students by students, so that they can really discuss things with their peers. All building on the courageous conversations and the way to discuss difficult conversations with respect for each other and themselves. The third subgroup was family partnerships. Now, it's understood that the district can only do so much because our students go home and live in the world, but our students and their families being part of this district need to see it as a community, so this work must continue at home. Families must take advantage and are encouraged to take advantage of the community building activities that the task force is about to recommend. So the amazingly good news is everyone loves the PTA events, and they should just keep doing what they're doing. They are a wonderful group of people who are doing really great events, and we need to have more support for what they are doing to bring the community together. There were recommendations for workshops, specifically for adults, parents, and families as a whole. Learning cultural engagement for parents and families, how to avoid identity-based hate, actual workshops and classes for adults who may never have learned how to do this, how to be an upstander for adults. Our students are learning how to be an upstander, but this way they can see it at home and in their communities as well and see that what they're learning is being modeled by the adults around them. And the same courageous conversations that are being taught in the schools need to be taught to the parents and adults. Now, what we do understand is that workshops will usually bring out people who are already interested in those workshops. And so it brings us to the next really important part of family partnerships, which is marketing and branding, which is much more important than it sounds. And it's not about selling something, it's actually about getting the truth out. The idea is that families will share with each other through little video snippets or the idea of how to share is really up to you, but the idea of video came to the task force mind that maybe before a concert or before a game there might be 2 or 3 2-minute videos of what my family does at or what this family believes of, and it's actual videos or situations that the families themselves record and the school gets to see, and everyone who shows up gets to see what their community is doing and who they are, and really not just giving voice to the social media that is negative that people might post, but rather the wonderful things, because we don't hear enough about them because nobody thinks to record them and show them. So giving that opportunity to see the good and see the wonderful things that the community is doing amongst a large group of people. The next subgroup was the Code of Conduct and DASA reporting. This also took a great deal of effort and a lot of discussion because it is so important. And we came up with, I think, 4 specific things: accessibility, awareness, commitment, and addressing certain things. So let's go back to accessibility for a moment. The Code of Conduct is a 5,000-page document, just kidding, but it's very long. I think it's an 80-page document or something incredibly long, and there are shortened versions of it, but again, to make that more accessible. Online plus in paper, there's been discussion about recommendation to have a student handbook that is given out possibly at different age groups, time periods during their time. So each code of conduct that they receive is the same code of conduct, but age appropriate for them to understand it and for them to actually identify with it. Also, we recommend adding more languages to the code of conduct, putting it out there in more languages so that everyone in our community can really understand that. And the packet that we gave you lists 6 other languages that we'd like it to be, that we recommend it being added to. In awareness, again, we want to make sure that people know where they can find the code of conduct. We want to make it impossible not to see the code of conduct. And so it needs to be everywhere. It needs to be posted. It needs to be in paper. It already is in the calendar, but it turned out so many people don't know that it's in the calendar. And so something in big, bold writing that says code of conduct inside, which brings us to commitment. We know they've seen it if we require that adults and students sign it. And so not just, and I don't know if you can require, but the recommendation is to require that they have signed it and seen it and understood it, so that no one can say, I didn't know that was in there, or I didn't know that broke the code of conduct, or I've never seen that before. And then we have addressing, and this is specifically with DASA reporting. So we want to make sure that the DASA coordinator, which are many DASA coordinators, but that the DASA coordinators who right now already do receive anti-bias training, that we evaluate the training that they receive, and that the school district make sure that we re-evaluate the DASA coordinating training to ensure the mitigation of any unconscious bias among staff who conduct the investigations and adjudicate the DASA complaints. Just to make sure that every section of our DASA reporting is as free of unconscious or conscious bias as we can make it. That is important for making sure that everyone feels that they have really been given a fair deal and a fair shot at what they are reporting or what they are being accused of. And with that, for the next one, I'll hand it over to her.
So data collection was our last subgroup, and really this process could begin pretty quickly. I thought a compelling idea is to administer a school culture survey at the end of 5th grade, 8th grade, and 12th grade, sort of as a exit survey where students may feel more comfortable sharing information that they perhaps felt they couldn't share while in the school year. And I think assessing the district by collecting an anonymous survey whose credibility and legitimacy is vetted is essential to get a temperature on how the district is doing and how are we improving as we move forward with these efforts. So in closing, this is really these recommendations are the beginning of something that needs to be a long-term effort, including all of these things that you see on the screen, examining the curriculum, reviewing policies, collecting data, encouraging wide stakeholder involvement. And this task force is concluding its work, and we thank you for this opportunity. So the question is, how does the work continue? And how do we keep this in front of us as a community so we can continue to do better? So thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for the presentation. Thank you. I want to take the moment to thank the co-chairs and then also all the members who are involved in central administration and all the building level leaders who were involved in this process. And I know that there were countless hours into this, not just the meeting itself, but the research behind the scene. And I wanted to let the community know that all the meeting progresses, they've been posted on the district website, so anybody can go to the district website and pull out the meeting notes from the hard work that they've put in. So again, I really can't thank you guys enough to, for putting in your time, to stepping up, to put in all your time. And SIASA is committed to fighting all forms of biases, whether it's anti-Semitism or Islamophobia, anti-Asian, anti-Black, just all forms. And no, the hate has no place in SIASA, period. So, all this time that we've been invested into creating this task force and then also working on this task force, I really just can't thank you guys enough for your hard work. Thank you again. And at this point, I would like to ask Dr. Rogers to bring back a plan to implement all the recommendations, that have been listed from the task force, and then also for the board to review again, just like what Pastor Sheridan said, that this is a long-term plan. It doesn't end today. We have a very long road ahead of us, and then we want to be able to find the best way to implement all the hard work that these co-chairs and also the students or the members have put in. And this is not going to be although this is the conclusion for the report, but it's not a conclusion for what we have to do for the future. So, okay. All right, thank you. Okay. There are no legislative items, no discussion items, and no unfinished business. So we are moving on to new business. A items. A1 is the approval of the appointment of staff changes for April 2024. May I have a motion, please? Mr. Greco, seconded by Ms. Levitan. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? A2 is the approval of stipends and hourly rates for 2023 and 2024. Can I have a motion, please? Dr. Park, seconded by Ms. Koshia. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? A3 is the approval of coaching recommendations for spring 2024. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Greco, seconded by Ms. Falco. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? A4 is the approval of the appointment of summer school principal. Can I have a motion, please? Dr. Park, seconded by Ms. Koshia. Are there any questions? All in favor? Oh, Mr. Greco.
I guess it's getting redundant how much I like our summer program, and I'm obviously very happy with the choice of the principal. But I have a question. Excuse me. I have a question about, in the past, you're right, summer school was summer school, and then it became summer school 2.0. And I'm wondering, I was just looking at the budget, and I saw what appeared to be a decrease in the funding. Are we continuing going down the road of enrichment as a large portion of summer school? And are we expecting the same number of students as last year or less?
Yes, so a closer look at that budget line will reveal that we over budgeted for summer school last year. So what we're doing is trimming to the actual. So we're not making the program smaller, we're just trimming the budget line because we had put more in the line than was necessary last year. But summer school 2.0 is actually going well. And I'm excited about some of the class offerings that I think the teachers in summer school felt rejuvenated by the opportunity to redesign some of these classes. I think they align more with our strategic vision around flexible thinking, cross-cutting kinds of lessons. And there is enrichment, and there is also reinforcement for students who need a little extra help. And our mission is to make both of those lanes attractive and fun for kids. That it should be an enjoyable summer program regardless of what the curriculum is designed to do.
All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? A5 is the approval of a site letter agreement with the Syosset Teachers Association. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Greco, seconded by Ms. Levitan. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? A6 is the approval of a settlement agreement with the Syosset Teachers Association. Can I have a motion, please? Dr. Park, seconded by Ms. Abramson. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? B items. B1 and B2 can be taken together. They are the approval of Committee on Special Education and the Committee on Preschool Special Education recommendations. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Greco, seconded by Ms. Falco. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? B3 is the approval of Student Club Charters 2023 and 2024. Can I have a motion, please? Dr. Park, seconded by Ms. Abramson. Are there any questions? Ms. Falco?
Yeah, so one of the clubs is a recreational sports club in HBT for 6th graders to participate in recreational sports, which I think is wonderful. I was just wondering, is there an equivalent in Southwoods?
I'm going to ask Dr. Curry if she knows the answer to that question. I do not off the top of my head.
Yes, currently Southwoods does have a morning rec program for the students. So it is equivalent, but each school modifies the club to the specific needs and interests of the students in attendance.
Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? B4 is the Nassau BOCES Administrative Operations Budget Vote and Election of Board Members. Since the last board meeting where we passed a resolution to nominate the 3 BOCES incumbent members, BOCES received 3 additional members. I don't know if any board members would like to nominate any of the 3 additional ones, or we are comfortable keeping the 3 that we passed last month. Okay.
To be clear, this is us voting for the 3 members of.
All right. Voting on the 3 members that we passed, that we nominated last month. Okay, can I have a motion, please? Mr. Greco, seconded by Ms. Falco. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? B5 is the first reading of new policies 9120, workforce violence prevention, and 9550, expression of breast milk in workplace. And this, the same 2 policies will be adopted at the next meeting in May. Okay. And B6 is the authorization to establish school meal pricing for the 2024-2025 school year. Can I have a motion, please? Dr. Park, seconded by Ms. Abramson. Are there any questions? Mr. Ostrick.
Yeah, so I don't have a question specifically about the pricing for meals. I assume that's federally mandated. But I do have a question about the timeline for the bidding on our school meals or the outsourced food program, and how we can make sure that there's a robust discussion before we end up with a resolution in front of us about what our potential choices are in terms of outsourcing it, providing it ourselves, exploring other options, things like that.
I'll let Dr. Rufo, who's been managing this process, share the timeline and the trajectory that she's been on with the food service consultants. On the subject of the meal price, though, the meal price that we're proposing to you is our estimate of what the meal price will need to be in order for us to be successful in the bid that we have with the quality expectations that we have. So there's an increase in the meal price that is in order for us to be successful in our bid in getting higher quality food choices. So the number, the program is federally controlled, but this specific number is controlled by us. And Dr. Rufo, in terms of the process and timeline?
The state contract for food service management companies for 24-25 was just released maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. And that's the contract that all school districts in New York State use. And we have been working with our food service consultants. We did a survey of the students to get input on what they thought of the meal program. And I think I have a meeting with her tomorrow to sort of, what we're able to do is customize the bid specs to get certain items that we want. So we're going through that process of modifying the bid. Then the bid has to go to the state because they want to approve any modifications that you make to the contract. And then after they approve it, then we can go out to bid. And our consultants, and I believe we will be bringing it to the board, we'll be advertising in May. That's when it'll be going out.
So to answer your question, when would it be timely to have a conversation about what it would take to stand up our own food service system without a food service partner? I think that's a conversation that would be very hard for us to complete by May. in terms of the logistics that would be involved in trying to stand up our own system. It would involve finding a food service director, which is a civil service job, so we would be constrained by whoever appears on the civil service list. Then we would have to hire the employees to staff this program. We would likely have a different wage scale than the food service provider would have for those employees, so it would significantly change the cost structure of the program. It would give us some more control, but it would also mean that the staffing challenges that right now are the food service provider's problem to solve on our behalf would become our own problem to solve on our behalf. And I say all of this because food service, like busing, has been an area of operations that has been particularly challenging to staff in the last 3 years. So there are not insurmountable, but daunting challenges to standing up our own food service program that would take ample time for us to really work through.
Okay, and the other half of, I guess, my question is there used to be provision of school meals that were not done through outsourced contracts. How does that discussion, that not necessarily provided by our own employees, right, it was provided by PTA in the past, how does that discussion get re-engaged in terms of our understanding of whatever the alternative choices are that could be in front of us, aside from me signing off on $3.15 without any context for what's gone behind the scenes of that detail?
Are you asking to explain the rationale for why that approach to food service was discontinued?
Less so about why it's no longer, or why there are only options of outsourced food contract or standing up our own. Like, what are all the choices available to us currently?
Those would be the two choices, and my concern with the program that was in place is that it didn't comply with the federal food service program and regulations, and that because of that we were assuming a lot of liability. That was one of many reasons, but we had 4 pretty robust reasons for why we couldn't continue that program. So I think you have two choices. One is to run our own food service program with all district employees. The other is to outsource it. And the challenge in the outsourcing world is that there are really only 3 companies that bid on work on Long Island. So there are some national food service cooperatives, and it is possible that one or more of them may decide that they want to break into the Long Island market, and so we may be surprised to see a new entrant. But for the 15 years that I've been leading school institutions on Long Island, there have only been 3 competitors.
I understand it's do it ourselves or contract it out, but we're talking about at some point putting out a bid and potentially changing specs and then asking the state to approve the specs. And I wonder if, you know, and I haven't looked in a long time, if the contract we have now that we put out for bid is exclusive, and maybe what we do is think about updating those specs to allow, I'm not talking about going back to PTA lunch as much as I'd love to. I'm talking about having some kind of exception for the kind of things that may get other food items into the schools that may be more attractive to the kids. And that would be part of this May bid and would need to be discussed if we wanted to go that route.
Right. Unfortunately, that's a choice that will not be available to us. The law requires that whoever the successful bidder is have an exclusivity arrangement with the school district. So that's not a feature that we'll be able to write into the bid spec because it won't get past the folks at the state who then turn around and approve it. And in all likelihood, no vendor would bid on that if we tried to incorporate that feature.
Not to give you more homework, I understand how an exclusive contract will inevitably have some kind of carve-out, evening events, right? That's not going to be covered. if you could take a look and just see if there is something that we could, because obviously we have to get the bid approved. So I'm not talking about going outside of what the state would allow, but there has to be exceptions like evenings, weekends, I don't know, chocolate chip cookies. There's going to be something that we could do, and if that's a start, I don't think it's a bad idea.
And I guess the other remaining thing is, I thought I heard that there were student surveys and other sort of deliberations that go into the formation of this bid. Is that survey work and information available for us to review? And in other words, is it available to review in advance of us picking $3.15 today? Is this an irrevocable number where there's information that I feel like I don't have, and now I'm signing up to this, and maybe I'm going to change my mind if I have different information?
So one way or another, I anticipate you're going to have to raise the food service price. So in all likelihood, if we were to try to stand up our own food service system, we would have to raise the price more. So I think, Dr. Rufo, from a timeline perspective, if the board wanted to revisit this, adopt this number tonight and then revisit it at a future meeting, at what point have we run out of time for that process?
The meal price has to be included in the bid. So companies need to know what the meal price is. So we can't wait in terms of a decision. In other words, I can't make, if the decision is delayed, then I don't have the ability to write it into the bid specs. I'd have to look up the release of the bid. Correct. It doesn't make it. We're releasing before the next board meeting. Yes, this was our opportunity.
But we can make the survey results available to you. They're interesting at places, they're humorous. Our students had fun with the survey, but you know, they're asking for some things that we can't provide because the federal school lunch program prohibits us from providing them. They ask sugary sodas, for example. So that data not helpful, but fun. And then some of the things that they look for are just higher quality options. The students asked for more variety in the vegan, halal, and kosher options that we provided. The vegan options typically are just salad. They're looking for more like prepared meals kind of vegan options. So yeah, we can certainly share that information with the board.
All in favor? Oh.
So for the 10 years that I've been here, we have renewed the food service bid every year. We've kicked the tires, but not seriously, on the idea of standing up our own food service. And the reason why those discussions have never gotten a lot of traction is because I think the cost structure would be much greater to do it in-house. So those have never seemed like practical conversations. They tend to run out of energy. So we have continued on the path of renewing. So as Dr. Rufo said, the state bid specs have only just come out, and they're late. But if we don't move through the bid process quickly, we stand the risk of not having a vendor in place for September. That prospect worries me. So I would not want to take risks in this timeline. I think if we want to have a discussion about more significant change in approach to how we provide food service, I'm all for that conversation. I think there are some things that we could do at a very high quality, but I think there are so many variables in this around labor, around insurance, around sources of food. We'll never be able to buy food as inexpensively as a large conglomerate can source food. We'll be responsible for the potential cross-contamination of allergens wherever that food is produced, et cetera. There's a lot in this. We can have that conversation. There are plenty of school districts that have their own food service programs. It's not insurmountable, but even if I offered you another month, somehow we magicked away May and made it June, we're not going to get to a credible food service program in 2 months, internal food service program.
Why can't we go two-track? Why can't we potentially have the discussion Mr. Ostrich wants to talk about on May 13th, but also go the route of putting this out for a bit? We always have the ability to pull it or change our mind in June. As insurmountable as you'll tell me it is, it's still within our right.
My recommendation to the board would be to proceed with your bid, and if you as a board are serious about getting a plan from me for creating an internal food service option, I would ask you to give me the time to do that right. And I don't think that that's going to be something where you would want to risk not having a food service vendor in place for September in the hopes that we would be able to create a program between now and September. So my strong recommendation would be to proceed with the plan that we have now. And if we're looking to do something different, we would aim for that to be something that would start in fall of 25.
Okay. Yeah. Mr. Ostrich, we could have this discussion, from June until, let's say, next March or so for the next school year, not for this fall school year. And because this is a discussion that's going to take a lot more research and a lot more time, and we as a district, we've been doing things in a very thorough way, so I wouldn't want to rush into this decision. Okay, all right?
I understand. I agree. We're behind the 8 ball. I just want to make the point that when we were hiring the consultant, I said I wanted to engage in a discussion about our food service provision at that time. And now fast forward however many months this is, with a lot of intervening noise in between. I understand, and I'm not being unsympathetic to the difficulties that we've been in managing all the details all the time. But I mentioned it previously. We're now here. We're not going to discuss it this year. We can discuss it next year. I get it. I just don't like when things fall through, and that's the only thing I have to say about that.
Okay, so back to B6. All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? B7 is the appointment of election workers for the May 21st, 2024 budget vote and election of board members. Can I have a motion, please? Dr. Park, seconded by Ms. Koshia. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C items. C1 is the adoption of the 2024-25 Syosset Central School District budget. Can I have a motion, please? Ms. Falco, second by Mr. Greco. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C2 is the approval of the school property tax report card for the 2024-25 school year. Can I have a motion, please? Dr. Park, seconded by Ms. Koshia. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C3 is the authorization for type 2 action, CCRA. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Greco, second by Ms. Levitan. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C4 is the authorization of service contracts. Can I have a motion, please? Dr. Park, seconded by Ms. Koshia. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C5 is the award of bid for partial roof replacement and masonry repair at South Grove Elementary School. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Greco, seconded by Ms. Falco. Are there any questions? Mr. Greco.
All right, so this is a South Grove roof. It's a little under $1 million, and I'm wondering, is this one of the items that would have been in the bond, but for the timing?
Dr. Rufo, will you be able to answer that question off the top of your head?
I believe this was planned for, like many of our roof projects, through a transfer to capital. Yeah.
It's a short answer, no.
All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C6 is the authorization for special education and/or nursing contracts. Can I have a motion, please? Dr. Park, second by Ms. Abramson. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C7 is the authorization for health and welfare contracts. Can I have a motion, please? Ms. Levitin, second by Ms. Falco. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C8 is the approval of awards of bids as attached. Can I have a motion, please? Dr. Park, seconded by Ms. Koshia. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C9 is the authorization to participate in the Nassau County Consortium for Transportation Services. Can I have a motion, please? Ms. Falco, seconded by Ms. Levitin. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C10 is the approval of inter-municipal cooperative agreement for transportation services. Can I have a motion, please? Dr. Park, seconded by Ms. Abramson. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C11 is the authorization for piggybacking with Southampton UFSD for bid SPS 24-005 science supplies. Can I have a motion, please? Ms. Levitin, seconded by Ms. Falco. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C12 is the authorization for piggybacking with Southampton UFSD for bid SPS 24-004 school supplies. Can I have a motion, please? Dr. Park, seconded by Ms. Koshia. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C13 is the disposal of broken, surplus, and/or obsolete equipment, supplies, and books. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Greco, seconded by Ms. Falco. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Now moving on to audience to the public. Okay. The Board of Education adopted new policies for the audience to the public, and I just wanted to read it through so that everyone's aware of the changes. The Syosset Board of Education Administration welcomes attendance at the Board of Education meetings. The board business meetings will be live streamed and recorded. The Board of Ed values community input and provides opportunities to offer that input via email or in person. Persons who wish to speak during the audience to the public must register online to speak in advance of the meeting by 5 p.m. the day of the board meeting. Okay. Persons wishing to address the board in person during audience to the public must conform to procedures adopted by the Board of Ed. Speakers' remarks must conform to the following rules. 1. All speakers and observers are required to conduct themselves in a respectful and civil manner in accordance with the rules set by the board. 2. Speakers must address the board only, not members of the audience or the audience as a whole. 3. Speakers must limit their comments to issues concerning school district operations, school district affairs, or Board of Ed policy. 4. Because of rights protected by state and federal law, No speaker may speak about an individual student or staff member, nor will the board or administration entertain questions in public regarding collective bargaining negotiations, personnel matters, student matters, or legal matters. 5, no speakers may speak about decisions involving specific personnel or specific students. If a speaker wishes to address the board concerning specific personnel or specific students, the speaker may write to the board. 6, speakers may not use epithets, slurs, personal abuse, lewd and obscene speech, profanity, libelous speech, threats, and fighting words or gestures, defined as words or gestures which, by their very utterance, inflict injury or tend to incite a breach of peace. Any person who violates the rules above will immediately forfeit the balance of their time addressing the board. To be recognized to speak, persons must register with their full name and address and attest that they will comply with the rules stated above. In addition, only residents of Syosset Central School District are permitted to address the board. Each resident will have 4 minutes to address the board, which may be extended or is reduced at the discretion of the chair. The board will not permit polling of board members by speakers. After every resident wishing to speak has had an opportunity to do so, the board and or administration may respond to residents' questions or comments. No resident will be permitted to address the board more than once per meeting. No one may record another member of the public in a manner that is disruptive or confrontational. And I want to inform the audience that if the rules are not followed or if the audience heckles any speakers, I will first give a warning, and if there's a second breach of the rule, I will end the audience to the public portion of the meeting. For tonight's meeting, the audience to the public will be recorded but not live streamed the next day until our attorney reviews it for compliance. There are 2 ways for the community members to address the board, as I stated before, either by email or come to the public meeting. And I just want to make it very clear that I respectfully ask that those who wish to address the board confine their remarks to school business only. Our ultimate job is to run a school district, and I kindly ask you to respect that. Okay, and I just want to introduce Chris Powers, who's sitting right next to me, and that's our district council. Chris, you want to say a few words?
Thank you, Madam President, for notifying the community of the rules and regulations that are applicable here. I'll be listening very closely to make sure that the comments are limited to school district operations, affairs, and board policy. In the event that I deem that it's starting to stray beyond that point, I'll make a recommendation to you that we then direct the speaker to comply with these limited areas for their discussion to continue at that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Powers. All right, so our first speaker is Parisa Osmanovic.
Good evening, members of the board and administration. Thank you, Jack and Brian, for addressing the need for better food. My kids have gotten moldy bagels for lunch at Walt Whitman, and I appreciate it. Thank you to Rabbi Jamie and Pastor Rebecca for your presentation. Any serious attempt to address racial and religious bias in our district needs diversity in the leadership beyond 2 white co-chairs, and this anti-bias task force demonstrated how they could not accomplish even that. I wanted to speak out about International Baccalaureate, or IB in Syosset, and how the vertical articulation of concepts in a holistic framework from K to 12 would allow our students to think about their local and global community in ways that cultivate critical analysis and creative problem solving. After seeing the budget tonight, the cost of IB should not be an issue given the benefits it would afford our students in their college preparation as well as civic readiness as global citizens. When I think about the correlation between holistic learning, knowledge, and awareness invoking empathy, I think about our district's continued struggles with anti-Semitism, the ADL's curriculum, and how it has failed to achieve any of that. Have you considered contextualizing atrocities throughout history? For example, if we had curriculum on the decimation of the 8 million Taino people of Hispaniola, now the Dominican Republic and Haiti at the hands of Columbus, 5 million killed over the 4 years from 1492 to 96, with the remaining 3 million whittled down to 22,000 in 1514, and near total extinction, with only 200 Taino left by 1542. We might assume Dr. Rogers' email wishing us all a happy Columbus Day would leave students aghast. I found your celebration of Columbus especially ironic, since the same King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella that funded his voyages to ravage the Americas implemented the expulsion of Jews and Muslims from Spain in the exact same year of 1492. And yet you made no connection to the seismic anti-Semitism and Islamophobia of these figures, Dr. Rogers. I recommend you read a short account of the destruction of the Indies, written by Bartholomew Las Casas in 1542. If we had more curriculum on the imposed famine of Ireland by the colonial British, one that violently stole all the food and resources from Ireland, and not the whitewashed happenstance potato famine that took the lives of 1 million Irish and displaced another million in 1845, we might see our students drawing parallels between the withholding of food and water leading to the current famine in occupied Palestine, or to the enslaved Haitians that succeeded in their armed revolution against the French colonizer 40 years earlier in 1804. Learning about global struggles for independence after shared histories of colonial exploitation and genocide gives students perspective and context that can be learned in developmentally and age-appropriate ways as early as kindergarten through high school. If we had more curriculum on the perpetual cruelty and mass atrocities committed by the British through the entire Indian subcontinent, a region so diverse and rich in culture and history that the only constant theme in their recorded histories and many different religions are teachings of peace, all of our students might learn the origins of the Dharmic Swasti, its auspicious meaning of all is well in Sanskrit, and the religious reverence held by 2 billion Hindus, Buddhists, and Jains around the world. The symbol that dates back to some of the earliest cave drawings recorded by humans and was distorted by the same racist Europeans to galvanize support for what we now spend much of our time studying and repeating as the most significant and memorable atrocity in the whole of human history, the Holocaust. Do our students or faculty know the difference between these symbols? If any of the perpetrators are Hindu or Buddhist, how are you going to understand their relationship with a symbol that may be adorned in their homes or places of worship through a singular post-World War II lens and say, you're doing everything to prevent this from ever happening again? In the current No Place for Hate curriculum, do our students learn that from the Crusades to the Reconquista and through to World War II, it was the Balkan, Ottoman, Arab, Persian, and North African Muslims that consistently gave safe haven to Jews, while European Christians expelled them? The global community is aware of that history, and this district is not.
I kindly ask the audience to hold the pauses. Okay. The second speaker is going to be Mercedes Eustache. Mercedes Eustache. Okay. Next one will be Brian Tibet.
Thank you. At the last board meeting in March, the live stream was stopped, like tonight's, just before the start of the public comment period. We were told at that time that the recording would be available the next day after being reviewed for compliance with the rules. As a matter of fact, it was not available on the district's YouTube channel for 2 weeks. When I finally had a chance to see the complete live stream of last month's meeting, I didn't see anything in the public comments that could possibly be construed as a violation of the rules. And so I think an explanation is needed as to why it took so long to post that video. I also want to raise some serious constitutional concerns with the new rules. Now, I'm aware, and we have been reminded repeatedly, that the school board is not required to have any public comment period at all. Though I don't think the voters of this district would be happy if it was abolished. I want to remind the board, however, that the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that once a school board decides to hold a public comment period, it constitutes a limited public forum during which First Amendment protections apply. This means that time, place, and manner restrictions are allowed so long as they're reasonable. For example, it's reasonable to limit the right to speak to residents of the district. It also means that any content prohibitions must be viewpoint neutral and narrowly drawn in order to achieve a compelling state interest. So let's look at how the new policies meet these constitutional tests. Well, take the policy of pre-registration. I would argue that pre-registration is not a reasonable time, place, and manner restriction. It is, in fact, a significant barrier to public participation. Now, suppose a member of the public might come to one of these meetings, a member of the district, perhaps to see a musical performance, such as the one that we were treated to this evening, and they may hear the board say something during the proceeds that they strongly object to, and this member of the public might feel they want to say something about that at that meeting. But if they didn't pre-register, they're not allowed to. It's particularly onerous that the registration form requires a topic to be stated, and that's a required field. If somebody has plans to speak to a topic that they have reason to believe might be contentious or controversial, that might intimidate them, they might wonder if they'll even be allowed to speak on that topic. If the compelling state interest for pre-registration is to ensure that only residents of the district can speak, I believe that goal can be achieved in other ways. Also, I want to speak to the policy of removing recorded live streams or not posting them in the first place. I've heard the superintendent say that because live streams are being removed in their entirety, that this makes it compatible with viewpoint neutrality. I disagree. Since there's never an explanation as to why the videos are removed or what rule was violated, those who spoke are just left to wonder if maybe it was their comment that caused the video to be purged. And that's a strong disincentive to speak out in further meetings. So I urge the board to review these policies and seriously reconsider them. Thank you.
The next speaker will be Hassan Sheikh.
Good evening. I wish we had a little bit more space between these chairs. Might be easier to walk across. Today I wanted to talk about the emails that we've been receiving from the school district and these repeated swastikas that are being drawn or other events that are being taking place. Since October 7th, I went through every single email until last week. There were 17 incidents. The email, I believe that came today or yesterday, that makes it 19 incidents. What I fail to understand is why are so many incidents taking place only in Syosset? I've spoken to folks from other school districts. There are not that many emails that are floating around. There are not many incidents that are happening. So my question is, why are so many incidents taking place here? Now, in the emails, we're being reminded every time that, parents need to be partners, and I agree with that. Absolutely, parents need to be partners. But I guarantee you that in no household there are any conversations happening that, a kid must go and do this. No parent would want their kid to be doing something like this and then having to deal with law enforcement after they've done something like this. So I want to turn the table back to the school administration to see what it may be that you guys might be doing something wrong. Maybe there's a time for self-reflection to understand that maybe the actions that are being taken by the administration need to be looked at. Maybe you guys need to speak to other school districts and find out what they're doing differently, because I think we really need to put a stop to this. We really need to put this behind us, and we really need to move forward. I specifically moved to Syosset because of the school district. I would want my kids to be learning in a safe and welcoming environment. Reading the emails right now doesn't make the school a welcoming place for my kids to be coming to right now. I feel like the kids are under a lot of stress. They're under a lot of pressure. And, we need to figure out a way and move forward with this. Now, a lot of steps have been taken by the school district, but it doesn't seem to be helping. So, I would really appreciate, Dr. Rogers, if you could respond to the email that I had sent a couple days ago. And, I really hope to see a shift in practice and, perhaps some new things that can be introduced, so that we can move along. And, I feel like the emails are, a little bit over the top. So maybe you need to turn it, turn down the notch a little bit there. Thank you.
The next speaker will be Leslie Schlednoff.
Sir, you'll have to forgive me. Most of what you've said, is a big part of what I'm saying.
I love you.
So, I
Ms.
love you
Schlednoff,
too.
please, you are here to
I
address the
don't want-
board.
I-
You're here to address the board,
I
so I just want
apologize.
to remind you of
Okay.
that.
I'd like to respectfully note that what I'm sharing this evening is not intended to take away from the experiences of any member of any other marginalized group currently experiencing bias. I can only speak of my experiences within my specific community because that's what I know. My numbers are not exactly the same as the gentleman who spoke. I perhaps have deleted emails or didn't receive any, but I'd like to share. HBT, November 2nd. Syosset High School, November 2nd. Syosset High School, November 3rd. HBT, November 13th. Southwoods, November 16th. Syosset High School, December 1st. Southwoods, December 8th. Syosset High School, February 9th. Syosset High School, March 27th. Southwoods, April 11th. Syosset High School, April 15th. To my best count, which is clearly off, these dates are the dates the district communicated incidents of anti-Semitism stated in important message from the superintendent emails to families received since October 7th. Understand the actual occurrences may not have occurred on the dates I shared. I know one such incident was reported 3 weeks after it happened, and there was given a somewhat satisfactory explanation. Please consider a margin of error if by accident I did not include others. There was not, to my knowledge, or to my research, an important message from the superintendent email report based on any other religion that shared with the community, which could mean one of a few things. Either they didn't happen, or they happened and were not reported, or, at worst, they happened, were reported, and were not shared with the community the way acts of anti-Semitism are shared, and quite honestly, if that's the case, it is shameful. All my neighbors of faith deserve to be protected and acknowledged. Please also consider I was not able to get that information from the district, and I had to collect it myself. Manishchana halayla hazem mikol halaylo. For my Jewish friends and community present here today, you know where this is going. For those of you on the board, in the administration, and anyone else who may not understand, allow me to provide a translation for you. Why is this night different from all other nights? This is the first of 4 questions we ask as part of our Passover Seder ritual every year. This Monday evening, Jews in our Syosset community will be observing one of our holiest days that commemorates the Exodus from Egypt. But asking the question this year simply does not have the same meaning, at least to me. Today, and most recently for my children and their schoolmates, it seems like this day is not any different from any other day in Syosset as the incidents of blatant anti-Semitism continue to rise in our community again. It has never been easy to get used to. Since I last spoke at a board meeting, I had great hopes that things would turn around for all of us, but they haven't. Whatever Syosset is doing, whether by law or by their own policy, is simply not working for anyone. I'm not really interested in requiring high school or middle school students to sit through lectures upon lectures that will bore them to tears if that's all you have to offer. I have taught both middle school and high school age students myself. They're not going to read any policies. They're not going to read a booklet. They're just not going to do it. I think it's a pipe dream. And I have enough experience to substantiate that. I have plenty of ideas to share with you, and I'd be happy to do it at another time. I only have 36 seconds left. I'm going to actually have to skip through some things. Given the number of reported incidents shared with us, and only by that number in less than 6 months' time, the rate of anti-Semitic acts are epidemic in nature, spreading like an infectious disease. Why does Syosset have so many incidents when other Long Island districts do not? Is it your doing? Of course not. What are districts, leaders in other areas doing that you're not? I know local administrators from multiple districts meet with each other, both virtually and otherwise. What are they sharing? What are they seeing? What are they doing? And why aren't you telling us?
The the next speaker will be Ibrahim Khwaja.
Good evening. I understand it's been a long evening tonight, and I'd like to be brief. Please understand that the Muslim community here in Syosset is hurting. We're really hurting. We'd like answers to these questions. Why wasn't there a Muslim co-chair on the anti-bias task force when a fully qualified candidate was willing and able to join? I mentioned it at the last meeting. I mentioned it through emails. Nothing. Just goes to show you where the mindset is, not only on the board, the administration, but with the co-chairs. Why does Syosset have an anti-Asian problem, anti-Asian hate problem? Why doesn't the district announce and email us about each and every Islamophobic incident, just like it does for other hate incidents? Why are kids drawing these hate symbols? Why doesn't Syosset hire Muslim faculty? Why are Muslim students reprimanded and suspended at a disproportionate rate? Mr. Powers, why don't we, the Syosset parent and student community, get to vote on the school attorney? Why does this lawyer deserve to be our lawyer? Why does this man shape and implement school policy with no input from the people who are subject to his whims?
This concludes the audience to the public portion of the meeting, and I just wanted to address a few points. The co-chairs for the anti-bias task force, as well as the board, we have been very, very actively looking for the third chair since February. I just want to make that clear to the public. And I apologize to the co-chairs, and also the entire task force who have put in so much time. And I just want to let you know that we, as a board, I myself, I can't speak for any other people, but I myself really appreciate the time that you have put in. Okay. And as far as the policy goes, the board is constantly reviewing the policy as we go and modify it. So the policy that we put together is so that we could have the meetings in order, and then this way we can effectively listen to what the community has to address the board. Okay, so with that, and Dr. Rogers, I know you have something that you want to share with the community, so go ahead.
Sure, I think there were a couple of themes tonight. First of all, the theme of curriculum. So, as I said at the last meeting, I find a lot to like about the International Baccalaureate curriculum, but it is a daunting transition, and monetary resources are not the only resources that would be required to make that transition. But there's a lot to learn from that curriculum, its approach to how curriculum is structured, how it scopes and sequences and spirals, and the way it uses cross-cutting concepts to amplify kids' understanding of things. I take all of your points about where the emphasis is placed on the many unfortunate incidences of man's inhumanity to man over the course of history. Certainly there's no lack of strong opinions on where those emphases should be placed. We are guided by the state standards and are always open to hearing thoughts and suggestions of our public. Ms. Chang addressed the board's continuing evolution of their rules to try and maintain order at the meetings. One of the reasons why we've asked our attorneys to review the live stream of the audience to the public is because we have experienced instances that violate laws that we're required to observe, such as FERPA. And so because of that, we cannot be a host for something that causes us to violate a law that we must follow. So knowing that it is exceedingly difficult to try and make fine-grained First Amendment calculus on the fly late at night in sometimes emotionally charged atmospheres. The board chose to buy themselves the time that's necessary to have someone with constitutional experience review the footage to make sure that it is something that will not violate the school district's laws and policies. In terms of reporting of data, it has been, all districts are constrained by federal privacy laws about what they may report. So because these are individual student instances, they are infrequent in nature, reporting will implicate exposure to at least some group of people of what the incident is and who the responsible party is. So it is not typical for school districts to report on individual student discipline, even when that student discipline implicates bias. What we have done is we have reported when a crime is implicated or there is another instance of bias that is conflated with that crime. In New York State, swastika is a crime, the noose is a crime, a burning cross is a crime. They're all in the same part of the penal law. So that is what distinguishes that, and that is why, because it is a crime, we, in any of these incidents, any incident that implicates bias, we consult with the school's attorney. The school's attorney will determine whether that is a criminal matter. If it is a criminal matter, we refer it to the police. The police will make their decision about whether they choose to arrest or not arrest. But if it is a criminal matter, then it becomes theirs. They enforce the law, we enforce the code of conduct. So why are there further constraints on the kind of data that we publish and make available? There are the same reasons why we don't make data about student disciplinary incidents available regardless of what the type of incident is. The state has a form that they prescribe for us to report our data. In many contexts, the state will not allow districts to report data that has 5 or fewer individuals, so that it is impossible to work backwards to any one individual. So what that means is if, for example, 12 students took a test, 7 girls and 5 boys, we would not have data for the girls or the boys, because 12 minus 7, you'd still be able to arrive at the boys' data. So all of that data would be suppressed. So the one place where that's not true is in the reports that we do for DASA that are published on the state's website and that we furnish the data to the state. So the state is taking responsibility for the potential loss of privacy because it is the state's form that is specified. But the school district, if we were to do something and it was not the state's form, then we would be the ones that were intentionally putting ourselves at risk of violating the federal privacy law, which is known as FERPA. And then a common theme in a couple of sets of questions tonight was, where do we compare with other school districts? I will tell you, I meet regularly with my colleagues, and what I will say for Syosset is that we have been consistent in how we report. The other districts may be consistent with their own norms for how they report. There are other school districts that are experiencing similar challenges to our own at similar rates of experience to our own, and I maintain communication with those colleagues of mine because we are all frustrated and we are looking for ideas and best practices from one another. We are sharing resources with one another, and we are all committed to doing what we can to make this stop, because it is obviously painful for everyone in the community, whether you're personally affected or not, it is a place that makes us all feel unsafe, as Mr. Sheikh, you said. So I'm sorry to report that it is happening in other school districts, and I'm sorry to report that my colleagues and I are continuing to work at this, but not at the place where we want to be, where our school districts are beyond this. And I will say in closing that every spring we have the opportunity to hire staff, and often I'll always offer a candidate the opportunity to ask questions of me, and more often than not, candidates will say something along the lines of, what are you proudest of in Syosset? What is it about this place that you like? And they're trying to decide if this is a community that they want to become a part of. And I would always share how proud I was of how diverse our community was and how intentional our community was about trying to celebrate and that diversity and make everyone feel like they belong. And this has been a hard year for that. And I think I speak for many people in saying that I would love to see us get back to the place where we celebrate the diversity that is here and that we move through some of the conflict that has emerged. But I realize that's going to be difficult while students feel unsafe, no matter who they may be, and that means we have more work to do. But I still believe that Syosset is an extraordinary community. I still believe that Syosset's diversity is its strength. One thing I learned from observing the task force work is that while the members of the task force came from different fundamental identities, they had tremendous respect for one another, and I believe enthusiasm for working together. And if anything, they serve as a model for how we can move forward as a community, irrespective of what the recommendations would be. They illustrate by example how to work together despite those fundamental differences in identity. That's the work that we're committed to. That's the work that we're going to continue to do. And I think we should all want for that work to be successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers. And I do concur as well. I am proud of the diversity that we have here in Syosset, and it is everyone's responsibility to preserve Syosset as a beautiful community for our children to flourish in this district. Okay. All right, and I know Mr. Powers has a few remarks, so I'm going to pass it to Mr. Powers.
Madam President, prior to actually proceeding with agenda item number 15, you read a detailed statement this evening that laid out the parameters for speech tonight, what is permitted, what is not permitted. You did so in a very clear and concise fashion. The first 5 speakers this evening complied with the directives that you laid out, with the parameters that you set. The 6th speaker did not. A Board of Education meeting is a limited forum. That means that not every form of speech is permitted here. You are permitted to limit topics. You are here to do the business of the Board of Education, not just whatever happens to roll in for people to comment on. This is the business of the board. This is the place where it happens. You can certainly limit topics so that you can accomplish your charge, your responsibility as board members. You can also limit speakers. If they start to stray off of the path that you have laid out for them, you can speak to them, you can direct them to stop, and you can also enforce your policies, which is exactly what you did this evening. You were justified in doing so. The first 5 speakers complied with the directives, the 6 did not, and you acted accordingly.
Thank you. This concludes the meeting for tonight. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.